So this will be a series of new videos where I'm going to go over the history of a band, especially when it comes to their music. What styles of music are they putting out over time, and what are the central themes that are present throughout each album? Now, it's only natural that I'm going to start with Metallica.
You're a total sellout.
You done? I'm not going to go into discussing everyone's problems regarding the they sold out crap. If you want me to go into details about the haircuts, about the Napster bad era, then go watch the video I made a long time ago called Metallica versus Selling Out, where I debunk every sellout accusation that was given to this band. Now, if you also saw my old series of album reviews on each Metallica album, consider this more of a condensed, refined, and much better flowing version, and you won't have to sift through an hour's worth of me stuttering the whole time. I'm going to do my best and go through the history as fast as I can. A lot of people would know their history already. There's books written on it. There's online articles. Go look at it yourself if you want to go into complete detail on the band history. I'm only going to go over the general points, especially with each album. The band was officially formed in October of 1981, with Lars Ulrich on drums and James Hetfield on rhythm, guitar, and vocals. After several lineup changes, and don't worry, I'll go over a certain person and a certain other band of his in another video, Metallica emerged in 1983 with Hetfield, Ulrich, Kirk Hammett on lead guitar, and Cliff Burton on bass. When it came to thrash metal, that phrase was officially coined to differentiate the sound that bands like Metallica were doing at the time compared to their predecessors and influences. Essentially, thrash metal is a combination of the fast drum beats and attitude of hardcore punk with the double bass drumming and heavy metal complex guitar style of the new wave of British heavy metal bands that were being prominent at the time. In 1983, Kill 'Em All was released. Kill 'Em All as a whole pretty much features a band hungry and ready to take on the world through their stage performances. It's like the glorious birth of a star. Kill 'Em All is a celebration of heavy metal and the birth of a new era with thrash metal taking the world by storm. For the most part, Kill 'Em All is full of fast tempos and is definitely one of their more aggressive albums. It's a fun album to listen to, and each songs are great standalone tracks, but the low production can make the album seem rather dated and sometimes unlistenable. In 1984, Ride the Lightning was released. You see, where many bands would continue with the same formula for several albums before starting to change something up, Metallica already started doing this in their second album. Ride the Lightning, yeah, it has its share of fast thrash metal songs, but because bassist Cliff Burton had more input in the songwriting, he also introduced the basics of musical theory to the rest of the band, and this results in more maturity and lyrical sophistication that wasn't on Kill 'Em All. The sound is broadened to include acoustic guitars, extended instrumentals, and more complex harmonies, but still sounding powerful and heavy. The lyrics are most socially aware as well, tackling on nuclear war, inner pain, philosophical references. In 1986, Master of Puppets was released, and this album is usually created with them getting mainstream success. It continues the complex harmonics brought in by Cliff on Ride the Lightning, but it's a bit more refined in the sound, much heavier and even more complex. Once again, the themes of aggression, senseless violence, war, inner pain, and literary references are present, with some political themes added in. You also got to think about the seventh song on this album, Orion, is regarded by many fans as one of the greatest songs ever written, as it showcases Cliff's writing talents to the fullest. If you listen to that middle section with the bass solo, guitar harmonies, and then tell me, nah, it's not that good, then you, my friend, have shitty taste in music. Go listen to Justin Bieber, idiot. Master of Puppets showed a band that was much more mature than they were during the Kill 'Em All days, but they were still way hungry for what was to come. Many heavy metal fans started to take notice of the band at this point, as they were now touring with more mainstream metal acts like Ozzy Osbourne, and you sure as hell could guarantee they would blow Ozzy off the stage in those shows. Sadly, Cliff Burton would not see the success the band would achieve later on, as he was killed in a bus accident during their tour for Master of Puppets in September of 1986. After a period of grieving, Jason Newsted was recruited as their bassist. 1987 saw the release of the $5.98 EP Garage Days Revisited. Its collection of covers' main purpose was to introduce Jason Newsted to listeners before the big follow-up to Master. That follow-up came in 1988 with And Justice for All. Musically, And Justice for All continues the same musical themes present in Master of Puppets, but goes in a less melodic and much more progressive style. The fast tempos and heavy chords are still there, but the songs are longer and way more complex than Master, with songs having multiple sections, unusual time signatures, like the title song, Shorter Straw, and Frayed End of Sanity. Hetfield has said, songwriting-wise, Justice was just us really trying to show off and trying to show what we could do. Oh, we've jammed 6 riffs into one song? Let's make it 8. Let's go crazy with it. Lyrically, And Justice for All is also the most political out of any Metallica album, as it talks about legal injustices, corruption, censorship, blacklisting, while continuing the themes of nuclear war, apocalyptic subjects, and dabbling in the personal feelings of James Hetfield. And the instrumental on this album, To Live Is to Die, is one of their many tributes to Clifford, which features music that he wrote, and the moods it goes through represent the 5 stages of grief. Now, the 3 albums, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and And Justice for All, form an unofficial trilogy. While musically they have their differences, the lyrical themes and structures are relatively the same. The first song being the thrash opener, the second song being the title track, third song being the heavy, fourth being the power ballad, fifth being complex and thrashy, sixth going back to heavy, second, the last song being the instrumental, and the final song being the thrash closer. And yes, I'm aware Ride the Lightning reverses it, but you get the idea. If you were to ask most fans, young or old, which album was their favorite, 95% of them would say it would be any of these 3 albums. Me personally, I like all 3 of them relatively the same. If I were to rate it by production, Master of Puppets is the best. In terms of the better songs, I would vote Ride the Lightning. But if it was by musicianship, And Justice for All wins in that category. The Metallica of the 1980s was very young and hungry. They attracted enough of a following without significant radio airplay in an era when glam metal was at its peak. Heavy metal fans looking for a much more aggressive alternative just ate it up and swore loyalty up and down for the band. By the end of the 80s, the band was far from the days of performing in small clubs in the Sunset Strip, and they were headlining arena tours all over the world, and they still had not peaked yet. 1991 saw the release of their self-titled 5th album, which most fans call the Black Album. This time, the production values were top-notch, with Bob Rock hired as the producer. While many fans would blame Bob Rock for influencing the huge change in musical direction, it was in fact the band themselves who wanted it. The band felt they had done the long songs formula to death on prior albums, and wanted to compose simpler songs with only 1-2 riffs and only took a few minutes to get the point across. So this resulted in an album with more traditional heavy metal sound that was more commercially accessible, which also meant more radio airplay. Gone are the 8-minute anthems with multiple sections. While there's some thrash elements still there, it's largely absent. In its place, you have songs like Unforgiven, which has heavy verses and soft acoustic choruses, and Nothing Else Matters, which is one of the first songs they composed that starts slow and stays slow. Lyrically, all the political themes, and especially the anti-war songs, they're all gone. And in their place are songs with lyrics that are more personal and introspective in nature than previous albums. For example, The God That Failed is about Hetfield's mom dying from cancer and her Christian Science beliefs preventing her from getting treatment. And Nothing Else Matters is actually a love song about how Hetfield missed his girlfriend on the road. The Black Album was and remains their biggest selling album to date. It is one of the best-selling albums, period. It exposed the band to legions of new fans, many of which would buy their back catalog and discover their 1980s albums, as well as others who were merely along for the ride until the wagon stopped or they'd jump on the Nirvana bandwagon. Metallica were now bona fide rock stars with a #1 record, they had reached as high as they could go in terms of popularity, and they cemented their place and their fame in the music world. Many fans see the Black Album as a transition between their thrash metal of the 80s to the later albums, which continued the slower, more experimental pace. Hence the phrases Old Metallica and New Metallica. And fans are divided when it comes to including the Black Album as part of old or new. But almost unanimously, fans would say Old Metallica is better. I personally would put Black Album in the old category simply because it sounds more like their old albums. Largely due to the legendary tour supporting the Black Album that lasted way into 1994, fans had to wait 5 years before new music from Metallica would be released, which was a huge change because the 80s saw Metallica releasing an album every 1 to 2 years. 1996 saw the release of Load, and here is where Metallica was entering the peak of their experimental phase. What results is an album that sounds less like heavy metal and more like hard rock, with some songs sounding kind of bluesy. No more complex drumming patterns, and in its place are simpler beats than those even on the Black albums. I'll let myself and J-Map from a few years ago explain the reactions on this album.
This isn't Master of Puppets! Fuck!
What's going on?
Oh my god.
Lyrically, you have songs about greed, addiction, depression, and it gets even more personal from Hetfield. Until It Sleeps is about his mom's battle with cancer, and Mama Said is about his relationship with her. Load also has my favorite Metallica song of all time, Bleeding Me. Not only do the lyrics mean a lot to me it's a song about wrestling with inner demons and wanting to get the evil out, picking yourself back up after hitting rock bottom. I'll let Hetfield explain the rest. He says, there's a lot of things that scar you when you're growing up and you don't know why. The song Bleeding Me is about that. I was trying to bleed out all bad, get the evil out. While I was going through therapy, I discovered some ugly stuff in there, a dark spot. So as a standalone album, Load is a pretty solid hard rock album with some southern and blues rock influences, with very strong personal themes. But as a Metallica album, Load is simply that member of the family that you acknowledge exists, but hope you never have to see much of them at family reunions. I personally like Load for what it is. In some ways it is my favorite Metallica album because it's so different, and it's them doing things their way and going as different as possible. But I understand why most thrash metal fans are turned off by it. The same applies with Reload, which was released in 1997. Remember, originally, Load and Reload were supposed to be a double album, but then they decided to put the first 14 songs on Load and then the remaining 13 on Reload a year later. Reload continued the same musical and lyrical themes of Load and can be seen as a twin brother to it. The only difference is Reload is slightly heavier and contains a couple tracks that remind you Metallica were still capable of producing good speed metal. Many fans theorize Load and Reload was one of the lowest points of the band, or at least the beginning of it. Their rise in the 80s with their peak in the Black Album days made it seem like it was inevitable they would fade down. The bottom line is, with the unheard of success with the Black Album, the band knew that no matter what they did, even if they attempted a sequel to the Black Album, that the next album would be shadowed and took the experimentation route to regain some sense of sanity as musicians and didn't want to stop creating and branching out. Lots of musicians do this, and the results can always vary with each band. While the Load and Reload albums were successful in the charts and in sales, to many longtime fans, it was average album followed by mega tour, rinse, lather, and repeat. It was simply a period of the band coming to grips with the fame they had gained and them changing as individuals themselves. In 1998, the band released Garage Inc., a double album of cover songs. The first disc contained newly recorded covers of Black Sabbath, Diamond Head, Merciful Fate, and the Misfits, and sounded much more akin to the Metallica style that many longtime fans loved and missed. And the second disc contained all of their 80s covers as a way of saying, hey, we haven't forgotten about the stuff that what we were about. 1999 saw the band collaborate with Michael Kamen and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra to make Symphony and Metallica, or S&M for short. The band performing 4 concerts with a live orchestra playing in the background, with the set list essentially a greatest hits compilation of the time, with both old and new eras being represented rather equally. Now, many fans would wrongfully say that S&M was more fuel to the fire to say that they sold out, but James Hetfield has repeatedly said that it was an idea of Cliff Burton. The band would not attempt to record new material until 2001, but production would get halted on multiple occasions. First due to Jason Newsted leaving, and then Hetfield leaving and entering rehab for alcoholism. When Hetfield came back, he had a limited work schedule due to his therapy and recovery requiring him to fix his personal life and his family. Napster controversy was also fresh on everyone's mind and is still eating a hole at this point. This was a culmination of growing tensions that finally burst, and as the remaining three members of the band had a hard time keeping it together. As this was going on, unlike prior albums where they had hours worth of written material to work with, the band had zero material going into what became of Saint Anger, and essentially everything was made from scratch. The band also purposely wanted it to sound raw, and Ulrich intentionally turned the snare off in the drums, resulting in that steel-sounding ring. Let's also add the atmosphere was largely unfocused, with every dumb idea being embraced so they wouldn't hurt anyone's feelings. But with that said, when you get over the fact that there's no solos and the production is crap, you can at least hear that there's a lot of emotion and aggression being put into the songs. Saint Anger is probably Metallica's most aggressive album, period. In a way, Saint Anger was a purge of their tensions and emotions that build up over years prior, and wanting to get everything out and move on to the next chapter. Even the lyrics are representative of this. They talk about time lost from addictive behaviors, getting lost in oneself when the old feelings are triggered, losing grip of reality, and wrestling with inner demons trying to get them out. I appreciate Saint Anger for what it is. The aggressive style of music and the lyrics pretty much speak to me, and they have helped me deal with a lot of personal crap time and time again. But I understand why so many people hate it. I see why. Whereas Load and Reload are the beginning of the fall, Saint Anger is the band attempting to pick themselves back up to where they were before. Robert Trujillo would also be hired as the band's permanent bassist when Saint Anger was completed. So you can't blame Robert for the direction of that band in Saint Anger. Now, despite the mixed reaction to Saint Anger, the subsequent tour that went on for a year and a half was very successful. It was also notable because on that Saint Anger tour, there was a near lack of Saint Anger songs being played in the set list. And instead, Metallica chose to resurrect a lot of old songs in their set list. And they would continue doing this in many subsequent tours. Metallica began writing their follow-up as early as 2005 and 2006. This time they had hours worth of material written during the tour to sift through, and they made it very clear in many press meetings, we want this album to be very good. And they were going to take as much time as they needed, especially now that they were no longer in their 20-somethings playing in a garage with nothing else to do. They were in their 40s with families and other priorities to take care of. Finally, we got that follow-up in September of 2008 with the release of Death Magnetic. Now, it's ironic that the lyrics of Death Magnetic are largely about death and finality, which Hetfield says was more of a tribute to the rock stars like Alice in Chains' Lane Staley, who died due to addictions. But because musically, Death Magnetic shows a band that sounds way re-energized, like they're entering a new chapter in their life. The album sounds like a missing link between And Justice for All and the Black Album. The thrash metal is there, the power ballad is back, the instrumental is back, the tight riffing is back, the 8 to 9 minute complex thrash anthems are back, and yes, the solos are back. Yay! It shows the band trying to prove themselves once more they can still do it. And sure enough, while yes, the album has the naysayers who say it doesn't hold up because it doesn't sound exactly like their 1980s albums, many fans who hated the musical direction in the 90s welcomed Death Magnetic with open arms. A notable example is on the tour, which I saw myself many times up front. Their setlist had a good chunk dedicated towards songs off Death Magnetic, which showed they were much more prouder of the newer work this time around. That about sums it up when it comes to going over the history and going over the music summary and thematic summary of this band. Yes, I'm a newer fan. I wasn't there when they played the Whiskey A Go Go in 1982, but I'm a big fan and I will support them wherever they go. And I cannot wait for the new album to come out, which should come out as early as later this year, potentially. All I know is as soon as they get the tour announcement, I'm going to buy the tickets, get the pre-sale stuff, get front row in the line at the rail, and enjoy the hell out of the shows that are going to be performed in front of me. Look forward to more videos similar to this where I'll go over other heavy metal artists. If you have one in mind, feel free to comment below and tell me which one I should do next. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, like this video, and subscribe for more Coyote rants, animations, and heavy metal reviews. I'm Desert Coyote 22, and thanks for watching.